6% of San Diego County is African American. San Diego County, not the city, just the county. And it's just kind of recently dawned on me that there is no place for us here, which is very sad to say, but the place wasn't built for us. It was built by us, but it wasn't built for us.
It's hard. You kind of like walk on eggshells because you can't give 100% of yourself. You only give like 50%.
I just never really felt like I fit in.
I was used to being the only Black coach that's in this professional coaches alliance.
I didn't see anyone that looks like me here.
I didn't even know there was a Black LGBT community in San Diego.
It was hard to find people who represented me, the community or my color.
I don't know where we are. I don't know where we hang out.
We do have a big, large LGBT community here in San Diego. They just have nowhere to congregate. They have nowhere to go.
Hello?
Okay, let's say I did want to snoop. What exactly would I be looking for?
Signs of obvious gayness. Start with photos. Are there any framed pictures? If so, do they feature mostly shirtless male friends?
No, it's like mostly family stuff.
Coming out for me was a very interesting process. I come from a unique family background. Me and my mother are very close. We kind of speak to each other in a way that most people would not. So it wasn't ever really an issue of coming out. It was more like me internally trying to get comfortable with the idea of being gay, right? Like, okay, I'm gay. I know I'm gay. I'm fine with that. And then it was like, okay, well, when do you want to come out? So one day she was washing dishes and I was just sitting there. I was like, Mom, I'm gay.
When I was in high school, of course I had Omarion and Marcus Houston and Beyonce posters on my wall. So I think my parents, I haven't officially come out, but they know. There have been times where I am maybe a little tipsy and ready to tell my parents. I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna tell them, I'm officially come out, why not? And then I don't ever get to it. But there are also times where I stop myself and I'm like, well, I kind of always wanted to come out to my parents, like with somebody, like with, my person, but I haven't found a person yet either, so.
I came out to my mom and my sisters probably a few years ago. Actually recently just came out to my dad this year. My mom and dad lived together, so it's like this secret that my mom had for a few years. And my mom absolutely loves me. There's no question about it. My dad, he is a church goer to the max, man of faith. And so telling him was, I wanted to make sure that I told him for the right reason. I always thought it's like, I'm gonna be in a relationship. And when I decide that this is my person, I'm gonna tell him. And I thought I'd found my person, and then we ended up breaking up. And through that process, I realized I needed to come out to him, not for anyone else. It had to be something that I wanted to do. So I did it over Zoom, so COVID, Zoom dinner, and he took it better than I expected, but kind of along the lines of like, hate the sin, don't hate the person.
I was on tour with a performing group in 1988 and people were talking about coming out to their parents. And so I thought, well, when we get back to California, I'm gonna come out to my mom. My father had passed away in 1981. So my mother at that point became mom, dad, and best friend. So I wrote this letter and I got back to California and got to her house, and I had my own key. So I went upstairs to the bedroom and I said, Mom, and she was startled when I woke her up. She goes, baby, what are you doing here? And so, we finished tour and I just wanted to see you and I have something I need to tell you. And she sits up and I reach in my pocket and I take out this note. I got one word out of Mom and the tears. And she put her hand on my leg and she says, baby, you're gay. I knew it from day one. I don't mind. I love you. You're my son. And I went, but Mom, I have a whole speech prepared. Like, you ruined my coming out. She goes, okay, baby, let me go to the bathroom, and when I come back out, you can read your damn speech. So she came out, and I was able to read my coming out speech to her.
What brought me to San Diego, I was following one of my best friends from San Francisco in 1982. I went to San Francisco when I was 19 in 1970, and I had been there almost 10 years, and my life was unraveling. It was during the 70s, and there was so much going on. So it was just crazy. So my girlfriend and I came down here, and I must say, when I got off the bus, it was like coming to a whole new place. It was so beautiful and so sunny. Because in San Francisco, it was always rainy and cloudy, and it's just dark. So that was the first thing I noticed, how bright it was, which scared me because I was a nighttime girl. So I didn't want to be on the daytime, because part of my coming up as a trans woman in the 60s and 70s was that, we were trying to become our authentic selves, because the only thing I knew about was that I always felt female, although I was assigned male at birth. So I set out to find out how I can make that happen by any means necessary. So what I found was the nighttime life of that type of community. So that's where I lived. And San Diego had theirs as well, downtown on Market Street. That was on Fifth Avenue and Broadway. That's where the pimps and the hookers and the hustlers were, and that's where we were as well. Because there was a black gay bar downtown on Market and 8th called the Golden Eagle, and that was the black LGBT bar. And this were all the sailors, all the Marines, everybody came. It was like a party every night. So it was a whole different environment, so it was so much fun. The weekends were fabulous. We all get dressed up and we had drag shows and everything. It was fun. That lasted for, I guess, like maybe 82, 83, 84, about 83 to 85 they may have closed. But then by the same token, there was another bar called City Lights that opened on Fifth Avenue. So there was 2 bars downtown. We never even thought about Hillcrest. That was not even in our thought process. We had our bars downtown. And plus there were straight bars downtown. We went in those as well, because it was, like I said, it's a whole underground community of like-minded people. Whether they're hustlers, whether they're dope fiends, whether they're tricks, or whether they're our community, are just young LGBT folks trying to find their way and have fun.
One of the first resources that I actually learned about were the clubs. I didn't know anything about the San Diego LGBT Center. The only thing that I knew of was the lesbian club called The Flame. And I would say Saturdays, we call it the Black Night. That's when a lot of the Black people went out, we listened to the music of Dallas. She was a famous lesbian DJ. And that's where we would congregate. And that's where we would spend our social time. And then there were house parties. And then on Sundays at Balboa Park, there was a little area where we gathered and socialized. And these were actually Black people of the LGBT community. It was a Sunday, we hang out, they drive their cars, open their cars, play some music, we're sitting out on the grass, having a good time, enjoying the sunshine, just being around people that look like you, that love like you, and having that essence that, we are beautiful Black people. You know what I mean? And then for a while, they actually had another club called the Whistle Stop, and it was specifically geared to the Black LGBT community. What was really funny about it was a lot of the people that showed up on Saturday nights at the Flame were people that were serving in the military.
Don't ask, don't tell us, got to go. Hey, hey, whoa, whoa. Don't ask, don't tell us, got to go. Hey, hey, whoa, whoa. Don't ask, don't tell us, got to go. Okay. Whoa, whoa. Don't ask, don't tell us, got to go.
You did not know if someone was a fellow military person, you couldn't really trust them because you didn't know if they would go back and let people know that they saw you in a gay club, because a lot of times it was also witch hunts, where a lot of Interstate and Naval Service investigation would frame LGBT people and threaten to court-martial them and give them an honorable discharge out of the military. They would give them a deal. If you let me know who are all the other lesbian or gay people in our company and you point them out to me, right, you can stay in.
Some of you remember I visited Afghanistan just a few weeks ago. And while I was walking along the rope line, there's a big crowd, about 3,000. A young woman in uniform was shaking my hand, and other people were grabbing and taking pictures. She pulled me into a hug, and she whispered in my ear, "Get Don't Ask, Don't Tell done." And I said to her, "I promise you I will. For we are not a nation that says, don't ask, don't tell. We are a nation that says, out of many, we are one. We are a nation that welcomes the service of every patriot. We are a nation that believes that all men and women are created equal. Those are the ideals that generations have fought for. Those are the ideals that we uphold today. And now it is my honor to sign this bill into law."
I was at the Naval Academy when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed. So when I actually, joined the Navy, I couldn't be openly gay. So even though the policy allowed for us to be, that mindset and that way of thinking and the culture, not necessarily there yet. And I would say, I guess I could also maybe pass. Like, I don't have to, it's not like I'm out, we all wear a uniform. Most people don't know me outside of work. And you get those questions of oh, do you have a boyfriend? And instead of saying, no, I don't have a girlfriend, I would just say no. So there was a sense of not being able that I could fully be myself.
Literally 6 months or so after I had joined, the Don't Ask, Don't Tell got repealed. And then obviously the climate in the military changed because everybody was just okay, cool. We can be out now. And I had identified as trans for a while, even prior to joining the military. So I had to kind of keep that on the hush. And even with Don't Ask, Don't Tell, there was still kind of gray area in the military where it was okay, you can be out, but you couldn't be trans. There was other certain criteria that we had to deal with. So it was liberating, but at the same time, it was I still felt like I had to be kind of in the closet about a lot of things because the military climate is very, I want to say, masculine based. And obviously, it's harder for males to be gay, and that type of environment is definitely frowned upon. And later on in my career, after the transgender ban had lifted, I would say that we did have a safe space because a lot of trans people were coming together to kind of talk about our issues through the military and just navigating this new life in general. So it was kind of rough in the beginning, just figuring out how to navigate my career in this situation when I've been known as a female my entire career, how to go about my name change and how to go about surgeries, how to communicate, this transgender, for lack of a better identity, to those that had known me as a certain person or a certain way. And that was frustrating because a lot of people didn't understand, and you still had to deal with leadership that were old Navy, so to speak. So it definitely was a difficult transition.
Why are you here today?
Darling, I want my gay rights now. I think it's about time the gay brothers and sisters got their rights, and especially the women.
When I was in high school, I found Christine Jorgensen's autobiography. Christine Jorgensen is the person who had the sex change back in the late 50s, and that was my Bible, so I hid it underneath my bed. No one knew I had that book. And then I went to the library and I saw Harry Benjamin, The Transsexual Phenomenon, because I was always trying to find why and how I exist, because no one in my family could tell me or acknowledge or think about me being other than what I was assigned at birth. So my growing up was really very challenging. I think that could be in a lot of Black households where, especially if you go to church, we have this whole religious background, and especially from that era of people migrating from the South for a better life, because my grandparents raised my sister, my brother, and myself. So they had the ideology of, moving forward and being better and coming from the country and moving to the city. And then the church was our cornerstone. So I guess, looking back in hindsight, me being who I was not in their scope of even trying to understand, so nothing was said. Nothing was said. And that was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. I mean, imagine growing up and you have my older brother, older sister, my sister's being pampered to be the cheerleader, the prom queen, my brother being pampered to be the track star, baseball player, and I'm just sitting here. They had no idea what to do with me, but we never once had a conversation. And to this day, it still affects me because, I mean, you know, I'm still trying to figure out why my mother didn't like me, why my grandparents didn't like me, and my brother hated me, you know, and I felt in my heart that was a big burden for me to bear, especially trying to deal with who I was. You know, my brother passed away, but me and my sister's really, really close, and we talked about it, you know, and she said, well, I always loved you, we always knew, but you guys never said anything. I had to figure this shit out by myself. You know, can you imagine identifying something that's out of the norm, if you will, and you're left alone and try to figure it out by yourself? And that's how many of us were back in the day. And still today, for some segments of our community, still trying to figure out who I am. How did I come to be, and why am I here?
Looking back, I know what it was, but like at that time, I just knew I was angry all the time because I didn't know. It was kind of like a taboo kind of thing. Like nobody talks about it in the family, you know, like nobody addresses it. Like it's there, but nobody wants to talk about it, you know? And so that was a confusing thing for me to try to understand what was going on with me at the time, you know? Mm-hmm. It was hard though, because I felt like I couldn't talk to nobody. I couldn't tell nobody. I had to keep it from my family, my brothers. And so I was angry because it's like, how am I being penalized for something that nobody's willing to help me understand, you know? Does that make sense? And that's just for trans, and that's for Black. Going to school, there was literally 20 Black people at the entire high school. So it's like I was getting called niggers, and like it was a constant like battle, you know? And so being Black, and at the time I was gay, but being Black and gay was just like a double whammy. And so I did have anger, you know, and I did have resentment and issues building up inside, you know, that I outwardly expressed and getting involved in just gangs and crimes and fighting and things of that nature. And so it took a lot of therapy, honestly. it was a lot of therapy. That's where I realized like that's where a majority of my anger was coming from, because I wasn't allowed to be me, you know. And as an adult, I can look back and see that up until say about when I was 25, I wasn't my true self. You know, even when I was in college, like I was not who I wanted to be, you know. And I can look back and see why certain events that happened in my life was because of that.
But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
Growing up, we knew of the civil rights movement. We didn't know the deep, intricate parts of what was really going on, because our grandparents kept us sheltered. But then I remember Kennedy being assassinated. I remember Robert Kennedy being assassinated, Malcolm X being assassinated, Martin Luther King being assassinated, Medgar Evers being assassinated. That's trauma. So we grew up with trauma and not really knowing about it. So my worldview was kind of skewed from the very beginning. You know what I'm saying? Then going to church, and thou shalt not kill, thou shalt love each other, getting these confusing messages even from the church. So I was trying to find me as a person, as a human being, not Black, not female, just who I was, you know. And then when I came out to San Francisco, I sadly must say, I was oftentimes the only Black trans woman in different environments. So I often assimilated myself. I hung around white people because that's who accepted me, more so than my Black culture. So I ran because growing up, we would always get chased down the street, having bottles and bricks thrown at us by other kids, even up until I left. So I literally ran for my life out of St. Louis. So, sadly to say, I was totally okay when I seen another Black person. And that's sad to say, but that was it. I was afraid. And you know what? Sadly, in certain environments, I still get scared of my own people, of what they may do to me, because within the whim, a person can just, do whatever they want to, anyone, really. But, I'm 6'3", I got size 13 feet, I'm beautiful, but people can say, still have these eyes on me and something like that, and that can be dangerous. I mean, the mere fact that a black trans woman can get up, walk out of her door, and make it to where she needs to go and get back, that's a revolutionary act. Because oftentimes we're misgendered, we're harassed, we're sexually harassed, we hit, people throw bricks at us, and they laugh at us, And the biggest part of it was trying to live as authentically as possible, because oftentimes our lives depend upon how we look and how we maneuver through the world.
The problem is growing.
A transgender woman is shot and killed.
She was shot and killed.
A transgender woman brutally attacked in Texas.
Shot in the neck in West Philadelphia.
Attention from men has never been a problem. Even I got to San Francisco, I was there from 1970 to 1982. I can't count how many short-term, long-term boyfriends I had. Men were very, very plentiful in those days. However, it was the type of men they were. They were hustlers, they were gay and not really able to deal with it, they were bisexual and feeling better if they had a person that was appeared like opposite gender, they felt better about themselves. And then we had the tricks, and then we had people who live vicariously through us, and then we had those who genuinely like us, and then we have sociopaths. We have sociopaths who will love us, make love to us, and they want to kill us. And then we have black men in our community who love us, are very attracted to us, and then once they go through a process of having sex with us, they have remorse, and then they lay hands on us. Just 2 weeks ago, another black trans woman was murdered viciously in Florida. So this is an epidemic with our black community. Because white men ain't killing us, it's our black men who love us, who want to have sex with us, who are killing us.
I live in fear all the time. It's more of a back-pocketed fear now, It's like my shadow, like me and my shadow, we were best friends, Like we got accustomed to each other. And so that's kind of with the fear, like me and the fear, we've had to realize, like, all right, you're not going anywhere, I'm not going anywhere. Let's make this work. And it's a good thing because I'm able to live how I want to live, but it's also scary because then it's like, what if I get too comfortable and if something does happen, it's going to throw me off guard, and who knows. So it's, I just realized something. Yeah, it's just like I feel secure here, but it's only because I've been here, But if I was to move, honestly, I don't know. Anytime I go to a new place or vacation or I'm around new people, that's the first thing that comes to mind. How is so-and-so, how are these people going to respond when they physically see me?
I feel like transitioning for white people is glamorized. From the public view, I feel like it seems like it's easier for them because they're more accepted. They get this mass, social media following, everybody's so interested. And for being black, I feel like it's not that easy. It's not as accepted because you are automatically put into this hyper masculine mode where you just feel like there's this role that you have to fit because you want to be masculine enough. And we're mean to each other. Like the trans community, I feel like for black people can be very cruel too, which makes it difficult. I know for me personally, transitioning with other people of color and watching their transition, a lot of people transition a lot differently than I did. They got the facial hair and they got the body, and that was hard for me because it was like I kept getting misgendered all the time. Even now I still get misgendered, and it was just a very difficult phase for me, which was interesting because it's like, yay, I'm getting to be myself, but then it's like I'm still comparing myself to other people. And I don't know, I feel like people of color just kind of get the short end of the stick. Even medically, it was very difficult versus other people or other stories that I've heard that weren't necessarily people of color. So
I love Diana Ross. Billie Holiday was one of my idols. So I lived my life in a tragic type of sense, because that's how the world was to me during that time. You know, growing up with the civil rights movement, all these murders, it was just tragic. The history of the trans community to access the services was all underground. Like, we would go to silicone parties to have silicone pumped in our bodies because we had any other opportunity to get body enhancements, and go to Tijuana or go to some unscrupulous person and our doctor for those type of services. There were no resources, especially for hormone therapy. If you wasn't doing sex work or doing drugs, you can get HIV from sharing a hormone needle. So I was a tragic woman, okay, you know, and so I went to jail often in my career as being a hustler or a prostitute or a junkie, whatever like that, because I've been all three. I went to jail, and going to jail for many of us was like going to a hotel to rest. There was a queen's tank where all the girls were, because we were all together, and guys would come down all the time and play with us and stuff like that. So that was a part of our life. Go to jail, get a boyfriend, something like that, you know. And so I had a petty with 25 priors, and I had a prostitution. If you have petty theft and petty with a prior, that's prison time. I was expected to go to prison. So I went to court, and they gave me 6 months. I came back to the Queen's tank, and I was like, what? Then there was a young girl in there. Her name was Monique Center, one of my girlfriends. She had been to Stepping Stone. Stepping Stone is San Diego's best LGBT recovery program. And she says that she had went there and got her stuff together, got her clothes together, her hormone therapy. I wanted a different start. I wanted something different, but I didn't know how to do. So I called them, and I was released from jail December 25th, 1991 at 12:30, and there was a van outside waiting for me. Imagine, I had lived on the streets hustling for the last 20 years. I didn't know anything but that, but I wanted more, and Stepping Stone gave me more. And that was 30 years ago. October 10th this year, I have 30 years clean and sober. So then after that, they gave me $500 community service, and that's where I did my volunteer service at the LGBT Center back in 1993. That's how I met this white trans woman named Dolores Dickerson, working on demolishing the cross-dressing law. And these were two white trans women, and I'm the first black trans woman that kind of came into the political, social activism fold here in San Diego. And that's how my activism really started. There were times people would ask, what's that all about? Because I was a black trans woman, and they didn't understand why I was there.
I know for me, like, you know, I'm black. My whole family's black. And there was a time when I had a little history of drug use, you know. But like, when I went into treatment, I noticed with me being black trans women, they did not know how to assist me, you know? Before I like even knew about Hillcrest or the community, I thought the only battle that I had with being black was this like racism, you know? I didn't realize that in the LGBTQIA community, me being a part of that community and black was also another barrier. And so it was huge, it was a hard thing for me to accept. That's where I had to advocate for myself. So I had to educate myself to be able to tell people what I needed that was going to help me, you know? Mm-hmm. It's sad because there are some people who just might not be able to do that, you know, and it's just an unfair situation. But that's something I noticed. Even today, I remember this. I didn't come to Hillcrest until I was 23. And that's because the few times I would go out there, it wasn't a welcoming environment, mm-hmm. you know? What I seen did not look or represent or correlate with me. But I felt like I did not belong. That's something I never understood. That was back when I was identified as a black gay man, you know? Now I identify as a black trans woman. It's really like, oh my gosh. So about 3-4 years ago, I started doing a lot of community service. So like I was heavily involved with like nonprofit or community programs that were operating at Hillcrest, which is where the LGBTQ community. And so I was able to like meet and look and see, and even with that being said, you know, I still, even though it's like I can go into Hillcrest and know a lot of people, I still don't feel welcomed due to my skin color, you know, or I'm welcomed only because of the stereotype that black men or black trans represent. in that community, you know?
I've been out as a lesbian since I was 23 years old, and I just turned 40. But I lived 22 whole years of my life as just a Black woman. And specifically, I was a Christian, and I am a Christian. But the kind of Christian I was for that first 2 decades of my life was very fundamentalist, very devout, very strict in terms of, striving to live a life that is holy and righteous, while at the same time, from birth, being born with this natural love, affection, and, as I became an adult, obvious desire to be with women. So I kind of doubled down on Christianity in college, trying to rid myself of these thoughts. And that doubling down kind of evolved to an ultimate acceptance. At the time, my community was very Black, and I'm living in Atlanta, and I'm in the Bible Belt. It's the South. We go to this massive church. I was in a Christian sorority, all Black women. It was very, very Black. And then when the gay came out as truth and not something that I was trying to fix or change about myself, I pretty much lost my Black Christian community right away. So in Atlanta, I had to segregate myself. And the place that I felt safe being gay as a Black person was in these white lesbian circles in Atlanta. So the lesbian part of me merging with the Black, there was immediate conflict. When I moved to California, I was out. So I get to say, here I am, I'm Black and I'm lesbian. Love me and accept me. And it was pretty easy for me to find that in LA. Just go to any of the clubs in West Hollywood and you will find people that are like, hey girl, hey, or look like you. Making friends was much easier. I wasn't having to come out. I was just out and finding acceptance. And certainly living in Long Beach, it was not difficult to find Black culture. It was everywhere. It was not difficult to find the Black community, or if you wanted to go, you can find hair products. You know where to go in LA. Moving from that down to San Diego, those first few months was us looking at each other going, where's the Black community here? Like, lesbianism is not a problem, but your Blackness seems to be giving you some challenges here. So the first thing that I think we realized that was different is that the Black community is not really centralized in this city the way I have experienced it in other cities like in LA and Long Beach and Atlanta. And so you kind of had to spread yourself around to find the color, or the path that I took was I had to get really comfortable being the only person of color and only Black woman in a lot of the spaces that I was, moving through in San Diego.
If you don't know anyone here or don't connect with anyone, you don't know what culture events are going on. We never had anything to call our own. For example, when it came to the bars and the clubs, they may give us a night, but that was it. We were always added to what was going on. We have a lot of different people that's gifted in our community, but where do they get to express their talents? If we're thrown into what's already going on, it's already set up, it's already made, and they say, well, you guys can come. So that can be kind of difficult.
I really started to crave relationships, especially with Black people. One of my friends in Long Beach said, you should check out this promoter I know. She might be doing some events down there in San Diego. And she pointed me to Soul Kiss. And I didn't know anything about Soul Kiss at the time, but Soul Kiss was a group and they were hosting these women's events. They were Black, they were lesbian, they were hip hop, they were urban, and just kind of moving around these other different clubs. So I'll never forget the first time my wife and I were like, we found someplace to go, and we went to our first night out, and it just was our thing, it was our place. But I'm really glad that I did the digging around, and we were able to find that, even though it was small. But kind of the intimacy of the community made it a little bit more special.
I've only lived in Detroit, so I think comparatively it's easier being Black in Detroit than it is gay in Detroit, which It's funny to me. But growing up as someone who was always like keeping my rainbow flag to myself in my chest, you know, I think coming here was a release of like, I can be who I am and that can be okay. As far as my placement on the LGBTQ spectrum, but coming here also just made me really like dig into my Blackness as well, and it also made me miss what I had as far as like thriving in Black spaces in Detroit.
I had a lot of difficulties understanding what Blackness was. I never really felt Black enough for, you know, a multitude of reasons. Either the way that I speak, my skin color. As I became just more educated and understanding what Blackness could be, then I started to become more comfortable with my own personal Blackness.
Growing up, my parents wanted to do a really good job of providing a better life for us. Maybe unfortunately, that life was a whiter life. I grew up in a predominantly middle-class, white neighborhood. And so there was this sense, I remember growing up feeling like, man, I'm not Black enough to hang out with my Black friends at church. Like, I don't feel like I fit in there, but I'm clearly not white enough. And I'm constantly reminded that I'm not white. And also for me, like, I was gay. Like, it was just the stereotypes that society has placed on us that if you're Black, that you have to look a certain way, that you have to speak a certain way, that you carry yourself a certain way, and I didn't fit into that, so I didn't really know my place.
Let's talk about the so-called Black card. There are certain things that automatically qualify you as Black in the community, and if you don't fit in, then apparently you aren't really Black. Who said that? For example, you can't be Black and not like fried chicken. And don't you dare say that you don't eat watermelon, or you'll get crazy looks like you said you voted for Donald Trump or something. Many of these stereotypes developed because of racism, so continuing to perpetuate them only drives a bigger wedge between us. They allow others to define our Blackness instead of letting us make the rules for ourselves.
I've been lucky to always have a pretty prestigious job here in San Diego. Almost a year within moving to San Diego, I started working as a teaching artist at the Old Globe Theater in Balboa Park. So I immediately became a part of the theater community here in town. So like quickly, like I had connections and like life was fine and, you know, all these things. But you know, microaggressions are real and dating has been almost impossible. I have not had an official relationship, like official meaning like we both was claiming each other out in public since I moved here. And that's 10 years. I'll never forget, I was at a club that will remain nameless because it's not the club's fault, but I was talking to this guy and we were having, you know, real nice conversation. And I was like, oh, this is cute. And I was like, oh, well, you know, what's your number? Like, let's hang out sometime. And he was like, oh, sorry, I don't date Black people. And I was like, oh, well, I was just asking for your number, but thank you for letting me know that you're also a racist. So then I don't date racists, so it's cool. But like, I just wanted your number so that we can continue our conversation, but fine. You know, I chalked it off as like, oh, that's an individual, blah, blah. I had been living in Japan for a long time. So like I'd kind of forgotten what racism felt like. I had forgotten what racism looked like. I'd forgotten that was still something that we dealt with here in the United States. I had not experienced it for all of my 20s. I didn't know it still happened, you know? I thought America's this diverse place and we'd moved on past that. And then it happened again. You know, someone's kind of made a comment about not dating Black people. And then a Black person told me they don't date Black people. And that's when I was like, okay, wait a minute, San Diego. We need to have a conversation. What you talking about, Willis? I didn't understand. But that's kind of when I was like, okay, this place is different.
Yeah, dating is shitty. It sucks. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I've had 3 relationships in my life. The first one was puppy love. The second one was a real relationship, but all the guys I have dated in the past has been like the straight down low, but like gangbanger, has kids, baby mama kind of thing, right? Sounds toxic as shit, but it's what I'm used to. And so, yeah, that was great, but like the other relationship, trash. It's always somehow, some way that conversation, or we don't even get to dating because the conversation turns into my parts. What's operating, what's not, what do I have, what am I keeping, what am I into? Next thing is it turns sexual, and it's like, why is that the first? It's like everybody, they're all like, yeah, we can mess around, we can do this, do that, yada, 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 but I would never be seen in public with you. I would never marry you. I would never bring you home to mom, kind of thing, And it's messed up, like who wants that, And so it sucks because that's what it is. That's what it comes down to. I've had people all the time say like, oh, we can have do all kinds of things and have fun, but as long as it stays behind closed doors, we would never, like, we can't bring it out in the open. And that's a problem for me, because I'm not living in the closet.
Is you want to date me, then you want to date the full of me. You don't get to do this whole halvesies, partial, I'm not a pie. You don't get to take only parts of me. If we doing this, we doing the full situation. And I think that's definitely what has been rough. But in the theme of, being more unapologetic about myself and my identity and not compromising for other people, because, that is very much my right. Hello. I am not about that anymore. I'm like, look, if people want to date me, they're gonna get to know the full me, because I'd rather date somebody who likes me in all parts of me, because I'm not about to halfway show up in a relationship. Girl, this is full or nothing. We're doing full or nothing.
Everyone's looking for like the super stereotype black man, somebody that's super masculine, at least 5 to 7 inches taller than I am. So everyone seems to be looking for that. Since I'm not that, that's a challenge. And it's not only a challenge on like attracting people that I find attractive, but also it's just like a huge hit on self-esteem. So sometimes I can really get down on myself for that. And like being aware that it's something that I can't control is also, it just makes it more complicated. I'm a very relationship-oriented person, so which is why I hate the apps, but I'm also on the apps. I kind of go in a cycle because the apps are really hookup based, and me and hookups are not a thing. I don't hook up with hookups. And I just don't feel like I will find like my person on an app.
The challenges are the BBC. Everybody knows what BBC is. I don't have to say that. That's an assumption that a lot of men think about us as black men. We're good enough to sleep with, but we're not good enough to date or invest in or just share those memorable points in our lives. A couple of times I've been out and I've heard it with my own ears. I'll never forget this one guy, he loves black men, but he didn't realize that we were listening, and his quote was, "We got these niggers in check." That's my reality of what I experienced. So it's real. BBC, the first thing they say, and those of us that get on the dating apps, the first thing they say, BBC, BBC, BBC. So you get to the point where you say, if I'm a fetish, please do not contact me.
Oh, I'm not racist, but it's a sexual preference. The weird part is that a lot of those profiles do end up messaging me, but like asking me if I'm hung.
Someone sent me a message, but then they didn't look at my profile picture until later, and then they found out I was black.
I think I didn't have a picture because it was still loading, and I was brave enough to message someone, and then I sent them my photo, and their response was, ouch.
And I just told them, yes, like every man of my race, we are 10 foot long. We wrap our penises around our legs. It helps us with our fast running and long jumping.
Me and my best friend, we laugh about it now, but I just remember in that moment how much it hurt and how embarrassed I felt and how small I felt.
He said that I should have known that N-words like you don't know how to measure. Maybe you should go back to 2nd grade because I know your family never graduated high school.
The next time you're watching interracial porn and you watch the black guy just unchain his massive Django, I want you to remember that there's no, let me repeat, no correlation between race and penis size.
I was coming into my new confidence in my queerness. I was just kind of dating a little bit of everyone. I wasn't really sure what I was into. I wasn't really sure on my values either. So that was the beginning introductory of my dating experience in San Diego. But then the more that I started to learn about myself, I started to fine tune the people that I started to date. And I noticed, one, I stopped dating white people, period. Two, even with the non-Black folks that I was dating, we were having more intentional conversations. So I think the theme that I've noticed as dating, not just specifically a Black individual, but a trans individual too, there's a lot of anti-Blackness in San Diego in the dating scene. And then there's colorism. There's a lot of colorism too. So I've experienced being on the dating apps and being super charming and wanting to engage in beautiful conversations with people and being looked over, right? And then I would see my friend who might be Mexican identifying, aesthetically gorgeous or whatever, and those same people get engaged with them, right? So it's and in those ways where they weren't intentionally trying to have a deep conversation. It was just okay, this person's cute, whatever. So I've experienced more challenging attempts at connecting with people romantically in San Diego.
Historically, most all of my exes are white, usually blonde hair women. And I guess it's been hard and it's been difficult for someone who I feel I get those comments oh my gosh, you're so pretty, or it hasn't necessarily translated in a great dating history. And I like to think I'm pretty cool. I know I have a lot of good things to offer. And so as over the past couple of years, I've started to wonder, does it maybe have something to do with the unconscious bias of being Black in San Diego? I haven't been able to talk to other Black LGBTQ people to see if they've had similar experiences, but when I go out in Hillcrest, whether it be Gossip or Uptown, I really just don't see that many Black people. And so when you start thinking, especially in San Diego, the ideal pretty, whether heterosexual or not, it's white women, white blue-eyed, blonde-haired. So I wonder, why am I attracted to this type of person? Well, I would say I think it's hard to just on a dime switch who I'm attracted to. I do believe some of that is rooted into what society has told us what success looks like. And success looks like a white person. And so I'm not attracted to white men. The next level down would be a white woman. And so I do believe that part of my dating history, that my initial attraction to that in part is due to wanting to have that ideal of success.
I don't know anybody who's trans who has a relationship, you know what I mean? Who's married to somebody. It doesn't give me no hope for the future, granted everybody's different, but it's God damn, there is no dating pool for the trans community, in my opinion. There's a place for you to go get your rocks off, but that's about it. And because it's a fetish or it's fantasized, I feel because we got placed in that category, we will never move out of it. And it sucks. It sucks because the guys I've come across, it's a fetish, that's it. It's a struggle, and it makes me sad, honestly, because I involved myself in a lot of toxic relationships due to my identity being fetishized. the pot calling the kettle black. Okay, sometimes that pot be way blacker than the kettle. So, there is no dating. I don't think I'll ever be in a relationship. Not a happy, progressive. No, I don't think I ever will be. It hurts. You know, 'cause there's no reason why I shouldn't be.
We have so many layers of dysfunction that come from generations to generations that leads us up today to where we don't really feel comfortable dating our own. I've dealt with that in San Diego being a native. So I think it's some internal things that we need to deal with as Black men of why we don't love ourselves. Because when you don't feel that your brothers are sitting next to you is good enough for you to invest and date in, but we do it with everybody else. So I think we got to get back to loving us as brothers and sisters, because it can get very frustrating. I talk to a lot of guys that the biggest problem is that Black men don't love Black men in San Diego. We count them out for generational things that they might be dealing with. We count them out for the dysfunctions that we haven't acknowledged. But why can't we heal each other? Why can't we love each other enough to heal each other?
I met a young man named Eddie Matthews. We just met out in the neighborhood. I hadn't made a lot of Black gay friends in San Diego at that point, and I had been actively trying to meet more Black gay people in San Diego and actively trying to make more friends who looked like me and had a similar experience as I did. So when I met Eddie, we had that normal conversation of well, what do you do in your free time? And he's like, oh, I spend most of my time with the San Diego Black LGBTQ Coalition. I was like, wait, what? That sounds official. That sounds real. What's that? Where do I get the newsletter? How do I sign up for that? What is this? Not knowing what it was, I just went to the first meeting that they had. And the next thing you know, I was on some committee for Pride. And then that summer of 2018, there was a leadership change that happened. And it was kind of either the people around the table step up and take over the leadership of the coalition, or it wouldn't exist anymore. I had this overwhelming sense of, you can't take this away from me now. I finally found you all. I finally found my tribe. I finally found my people. I don't want to lose this community. And if that means I have to be the one to keep it going, then so be it. So I served as president of the coalition for the next 2 years. It was a whirlwind. It was a whirlwind journey. And what really compelled me to keep going, even when things were really difficult, was the more I talked to people in our community, I learned that I wasn't the only one who had been looking for this connection. And I promised myself that I would do all that I can so that no other Black person would arrive in San Diego and go looking for community and not find it, because I firsthand knew how important that was.
It's what I wanted when I came here. Just a space where people who are Black and queer can come find resources. So whether it be mental health, whether it be I'm just trying to party, whatever it is, it's just a big hub of resources. And so this group has been instrumental in me finding, Black queer spaces, because it was always either my Blackness or my gayness, and so being a part of the coalition, I can thrive in my intersectionality.
The biggest mission that we had was just letting people know there is indeed a community here. Not just our own community, but letting the greater LGBTQIA plus community know that the Black LGBTQIA community is among you.
The Center and the Pride office and maybe a few others are household names, right? There shouldn't be no reason why the LGBTQIA Black Coalition is not one of them. Right. You know what I mean? There should be no reason why certain other resources and groups are not a part of that household name. Mm-hmm. But, it starts with change, I feel a lot of people don't accept, or they're not willing to look at the stigma that comes with Hillcrest which might have a factor on the resources that are get spoken on and don't get spoken on. You know what I mean? Or it's available or not available. Mm-hmm. So it's like they all go hand in hand.
The first thing that people in San Diego and the greater San Diego community needs to recognize is that just because we only make up 6% doesn't mean that we don't need a space.
I think representation matters. And so when I walk into a room, I'm bringing beauty, I'm bringing light, I'm bringing energy, I'm bringing the strength, I'm bringing the ancestors with me, and I just bring color.
I mean, for starters, being Black, it's for lack of, it means being the shit, to be honest, like, because we are.
What does it mean to be Black? For me, it means being proud of what Black people, specifically Black women, what we're capable of, and knowing that we're really badass and we do amazing things. I have spent so much of my life wishing I had blonde hair. Like, why couldn't my hair be straight? Why did I have to not go swimming? Why didn't I feel like I fit in? And now that I'm 30, I feel like, no. Black people are so cool. I wouldn't want to check any other box